Hi there, this is Tony from pianotone.ca, and this is my review on my new digital piano, the Yamaha P-125. When I was upgrading from my Alesis Recital Pro a while back, I agonized between the P-125, the Roland FP-30, and the Casio PSX-3000 for quite some time. I ended up choosing the Roland FP-30. I loved that piano, but after about 6 months of owning it, I did take it back and ended up getting a P-125, which has turned out to be the perfect digital piano for me. So this is actually one of the most popular digital pianos in the world, if not the most popular. It's Yamaha's mid-level portable digital piano. So let's check out the review. So a quick summary of the features on the P-125. It's got 88 fully weighted graded hammer action keys, 4 levels of touch sensitivity. There's a subtle matte finish on the black keys. 24 voices, 192 notes of polyphony. There's 4 types of reverb, and for each of those types of reverb, you can adjust the reverb depth by 20 different levels. There's also damper resonance and sound boost. For connectivity, there's 2 quarter-inch headphone jacks in the front of the piano, and there's 2 proper left and right line outputs that are quarter-inch in the back to connect to external audio equipment. There's a USB to device port that not only transmits MIDI data, but also audio data in both directions. That's a huge feature, and I'm going to talk a bunch about that later. There's a generic quarter-inch sustain pedal input, and there's also a triple pedal input for Yamaha's own triple pedal unit that you can buy if you like to use with the P-125. The onboard interface is really good. Most of the settings you can get at quite easily just from the buttons on board. One nice touch that Yamaha has included is they include this in the box. It's like a stiff paper printed guide of all the key combinations that you might need to use if you're wanting to change any of the settings that you can't get at easily on the onboard interface. And this is super handy, so nice touch, Yamaha. There's 14 watts of speaker power. There's speakers on the top, which is nice to have them facing towards you. There's also speakers on the bottom. Now I've cut holes in my piano table that I made here, so the bottom speakers are exposed, so I can hear those quite nicely. There is, however, a table EQ setting you can turn on or off for the Yamaha P-125. So if you are putting this on a table that doesn't have holes where the bottom speakers are, it's going to adjust the EQ to make it sound a little bit better when everything's being focused out of the top instead. A lot of the standard common digital piano features are all going to be here. Things like metronome with you can change the chime to match different beats. There's even on Yamaha, there's even a vocal feedback to tell you what the BPM is, so that's pretty handy. You can transpose the piano. You can also actually fine-tune it if you want. There's a layer mode, so you can layer 2 voices together. You can adjust the relative volume between the 2 of them. There's a split mode, so you can put one voice on one half, one voice on the other half. There's a lesson mode, so that you can also split the piano, but in this case you're getting the same pitch on either side, so if you're working with an instructor, that can be really helpful. The P-125 is compatible with half pedaling. My generic sustain pedal doesn't work with half pedaling, but I could get the Yamaha FC3A pedal, and that's compatible with half pedaling, or if I got the triple pedal unit as well, that's also compatible with half pedaling. There's 20 rhythms. You can turn on or off intros and outros, and you can also turn on or off the bass accompaniment. There's onboard MIDI recording. It's 1 song, 2 tracks. There's 50 built-in songs, and you can play along with those, but you can also turn off the left or the right half if you want to, just work on one hand at a time. So that's pretty handy. One of the biggest features about the Yamaha P-125, in my opinion, is the Smart Pianist app, which is absolutely fantastic. So I'll be going into that a bit later. Okay, so the key action on the Yamaha P-125. It's 88 fully weighted, graded hammer action keys, so it's heavier on the left side, and as you move up to the right, it gets a little bit lighter to play. So it mimics the feel of playing an acoustic piano. This is Yamaha's GHS action. It's a dual sensor action. It's been around for a while, and for the most part, it's really well liked and really well known. You'll find it on the Yamaha P-45, which is Yamaha's entry-level digital piano, and you'll also find it on more expensive instruments like the DGX 660 or the Arius YDP 144 or others. And I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Yamaha just released the new version of the DGX 660, which is the DGX 670, which is an amazing looking instrument, and it also has the GHS action on it. There's a subtle matte finish on the black keys. Personally, I don't notice that when I'm playing as far as providing any different anti-slip feeling compared to the white keys. Some people might disagree with me. There's 4 levels of touch sensitivity. It's actually 3 levels and then off. Basically when you play an acoustic piano, the harder you hit the key, the louder it will get, because the hammer is hitting the string harder. Digital pianos mimic that with touch sensitivity, and you can adjust that on the P-125 with those different levels. So if you're used to playing an acoustic piano with a heavy feel, you can try and adjust that to make the P-125 feel a little bit closer to it. Now, I really enjoy the action on the P-125. It's really fun to play. It's very solid feeling, very consistent. It's not too heavy, it's not too light. There's no sideways play on the keys whatsoever as you play them. They're not loose. You can just really tell the quality that Yamaha puts into their products when you play this piano. Now, that being said, because it's a dual sensor, it's not going to be quite as realistic as a piano with a triple sensor and perhaps escapement. The example that comes to mind for me, because I owned a Roland FP-30, is Roland's PHA-4 action, which is a triple sensor with escapement. So that's definitely going to be closer to the feel of an acoustic piano than the GHS is. Now, that doesn't make the GHS action bad in any way. It's just not quite as close to the feel of an acoustic piano as the PHA-4 on the Roland product is. A very talented reviewer online that I pay close attention to once described the Yamaha GHS action as a bit two-dimensional, but still fantastic to play. And I think that's actually a very accurate way to put it. So does this matter to you? Well, if you're an advanced pianist with a lot of experience playing on acoustic pianos, playing complex classical pieces, or if just having the most realistic action you can possibly get for the money is the most important feature for you, and you're willing to forego other features, then you might want to consider something with a triple sensor action instead of the dual sensor on the Yamaha. Things like the Roland FP line, or perhaps the Yamaha P-125, which is the top of the line in the Yamaha's portable series, and that one actually has a triple sensor wooden action on it. Now, I owned a Roland FP-30 for 6 months. I've been playing piano for less than 2 years still, so I'm still very much a beginner. And while I can tell the difference between playing that action or playing the Yamaha, I don't play better on either of them, sound better on either of them. And I mean, I realize I am still a beginner. I almost play nothing but modern pop, rock, and blues music, and the GHS action is fantastic for that, to be honest. One of the more noticeable differences to me as a beginner was actually the finish on the Roland keys is really nice. It's got a ebony and ivory imitation finish on it that is a little more noticeable than the matte finish on the black keys here. So that was actually something that as a beginner I noticed a little bit more. Okay, voices. There are 24 voices on the Yamaha P-125, and access to the voices is really, really easy. There's 6 different categories. There's piano, electric piano, organ, clav/vibe, strings, and bass. And then there's 4 variations of each. So for example, right now I'm on the first piano, and all I have to do is cycle through that and you'll get variation 1. You'll also notice it changed up on my app there too, because they're connected. We'll talk about the app later though. So you can cycle through the different piano voices, electric piano voices. So it's really, really easy. You get immediate visual confirmation of what it is that you've selected. So let's take a quick listen to each of the voices. So voices on digital pianos are a very personal thing. Some people prefer one manufacturer to another and vice versa. My personal experience with the voices on the P-125 is that on an overall basis, when compared with other pianos I've reviewed and owned, the voices on the P-125 are definitely the best overall package of voices in this price range. For example, the piano voices on the Roland FP-30 and the Yamaha P-125 are both like spectacular in their own way. They are both different, and you might like one versus the other, which is fine. But the other voices, the electric pianos in particular, the synth pads, that type of thing on the P-125, to me are quite a bit better than the ones on the Roland FP-30. And one other thing, just kind of on a side note with the P-125 that's really, really nice is as you cycle through the voices, the volumes are all pretty much at the same level. Many of the digital pianos that I've owned and tested aren't like that. You go from one voice, it's super loud, the next voice is quiet, so you've always got to be messing with your volume as you switch from voice to voice. The Roland FP-30 had that issue on a few voices as well, but the Yamaha voices are all pretty consistent from one voice to the next. Okay, so for effects, the P-125 has 4 types of reverb. There's recital hall, concert hall, chamber, club, and then off. And you can also further adjust those reverbs by adjusting the depth to 20 different levels for each one of them. In the first few months of owning the P-125, to be honest, I haven't really changed the reverb settings much. The following video is going to give some quick examples of the reverb settings and the reverb types. I'm going to just use the default grand piano voice. I'm going to start by playing a sample with the reverb off, and then I'll play one with the first reverb type, which is recital hall, on its default level. And then to try and hear the differences between the reverb types as much as possible, I'm going to increase the reverb depth level kind of about halfway up to the max so that it's a little bit easier to hear the differences between the different types of reverb. Then I'll finish the demo off by maxing out the reverb to 20 and then playing the recital hall again so you can see what it sounds like when it's maxed out. And the P-125 also has a sound boost feature. This piano is a very popular gigging piano because of the good quality sounds. It's reasonably light and it's got proper quarter-inch line outs to connect to external audio equipment. This setting is basically meant to make all notes as audible as possible, even those that are played softly, which is useful to help try and cut through the mix in a live setting. There's also a damper resonance setting. Its default is on. You can turn that on or off. And that only applies to the piano voices. And when that's on, it's basically intended to more closely mimic the extra resonance you may notice on an acoustic piano as the damper pedal is engaged and released. Okay, so for connectivity, the Yamaha P-125 has two quarter-inch line out ports, left and right, for connecting to external audio equipment, things like PAs, amplifiers, audio interfaces, mixers, that type of thing. That's one of the reasons that this instrument is so popular as a gigging instrument, is a lot of the other pianos in this range don't have line-out ports. The Roland FP-30, for example, which is actually a little bit more expensive than the P-125, doesn't have line-out ports, so if you want to gig with that, you have to use the headphone port with a splitter cable, which does work, but it's not really ideal. There's also a quarter-inch generic sustain pedal port for a sustain pedal, and there's a specialized port for the triple pedal unit that Yamaha makes for the P-125. Now the piano does come with the kind of the cheap plasticky foot switch style pedal. It does work, but I would highly recommend upgrading that as soon as possible to get a more realistic sustain pedal. Possibly even the FC3A from Yamaha that supports half pedaling, or the triple pedal unit if you're playing a lot of classical music also supports half pedaling. That's the LP1 that Yamaha makes for this piano. Now there's also two quarter-inch headphone ports on the front of the P-125, which is convenient as opposed to having them on the back for connecting your headphones easily. Now the really cool connectivity feature about the Yamaha P-125 that doesn't really get anywhere near the attention that it deserves is the fact that the USB to device port, which you see on most digital pianos and keyboards nowadays, is typically used to transmit MIDI data to and from a device on most keyboards. And that's basically the data of what you're playing. It's not an audio recording of what you're playing. And then the software app on the device then interprets that. So the P-125 does send MIDI data back and forth, but it also transmits audio data in both directions. And that's because Yamaha has built in an audio interface into this port, and that offers a couple of absolutely massive benefits. The first one is that you can use this connection just through the USB to device port, like I'm connected to my iPad right now, to transmit audio. It's like an audio in port. So for example, if I want to play along with some YouTube videos or with something from my iTunes collection, or just work on an online piano tutorial or lesson, then I can transmit the audio from the device into my speakers or my headphones. So that's super cool. And you can also record audio as well as just MIDI without the need for an external audio interface. And that's a big deal. With my old pianos, the Alesis Recital Pro and the Roland FP-30, with those, in order to record an audio file, I would have to take either the line out ports or the headphone ports, connect them to an external audio interface box, and then have that box convert that audio signal into a digital audio signal, and then the box then connects to the device that I'm doing the recording with. Now with the direct connection, you also get a much higher quality recording. So that is a super cool feature. And the other extra bonus of the P-125 is that there's an audio loopback on or off feature. What that basically means is whether or not I want to include any audio that's coming in from the device to the piano along with my playing in the recording that I'm sending back. So for example, if I'm playing along with a YouTube video, the audio is coming in from my device into the piano, I'm playing along, and then the recording is going back out again. With loopback on or off, I can choose whether or not to include the original YouTube audio along with my playing or not. So super cool feature. And just a really quick video to show you the difference in recording directly using the USB to device port and the audio interface that's built into the Yamaha versus connecting my Yamaha to my external audio interface and then connecting that to the device and recording it that way. Rhythms and backing bass accompaniment. The Yamaha P-125 has 20 rhythms built in that you can play along with, and you can choose whether or not to include the bass lines. And there's only, although there's only 20 rhythms compared to the hundreds you find on a lot of pianos and keyboards with fancy arranger functions nowadays, I've been really impressed with the selection of rhythms available. I've always been able to find a suitable rhythm for any of the modern songs that I play, including a straight feel, a syncopated feel, shuffle beats, as well as some useful 3/4 and even 6/8 beats. I also really like a couple of simple things about how Yamaha implemented their rhythms. There's a count-in for each one so that you can press the rhythm to start it, then you'll hear a count-in, then get ready to play, as opposed to start the rhythm and then come in. It's just a little bit more engaging that way. And there's also a quick intro and outro for each rhythm, which you can turn on or off if you like. You do have to use key combinations to choose the rhythms, but my handy guide has gotten me memorizing the ones I use the most often pretty quickly anyway, and you can also use the app, which we're going to talk about later. So let's check out the rhythms on the Yamaha. Okay, so some of the other features on the P-125, metronome, like most digital pianos are going to have nowadays. You can configure it not only for tempo, but you can also edit what beat the main chime is on if you like. So you can switch it to 4/4, 3/4, 2/4, or whatever. And while setting the metronome is done with key combinations, it is really, really easy because the BPM numbers are labeled. So you just hold down the one key and then hit 125 for 125. It's also kind of cool. You get a voice confirmation whenever you hit one of those. So if I hit the 1, I'll hear 1 said back to me, etc. And then you can also confirm your tempo by holding down the rhythm and hitting the bottom key on the keyboard, and then it'll say 125 or whatever. That's actually really handy because given that this doesn't have a display, it's nice to know what the rhythm is currently set at if you happen to forget. My Roland FP-30, I had no way to confirm the rhythm that I had it set at. I would have to reset it each time just to make sure. There's dual track recording. You can record 2 tracks on board, and that's going to be in a MIDI format. And you can include rhythms in them if you like. And you can have different voices on each track. This feature is actually mostly handy, at least in my opinion, if you just want to make a quick recording of something without having to hook up anything. Let's say you're playing something and you thought, hey, that sounds cool, I want to make sure I don't forget that. Then you can quickly record it easily. Because keep in mind that the Smart Pianist app that I'm going to be talking about has amazing recording functionality. So that's usually what you're going to end up using for recording. But the onboard version is handy as well, just for doing something quick. Transposing. You can easily transpose keys up or down, which is a great feature for beginners like myself. You can also fine-tune the instrument if you want to tune to, let's say, an acoustic instrument that's slightly off of tuning. There's a layer mode where you can layer 2 voices together. A very common version of that I've always used and that you see a lot of people using is piano over strings, in particular for ballads where the strings kind of fill out the song a little bit. And there's so many great voices though on the P-125 that I find I'm layering all sorts of different things and trying different kinds of layers and finding all sorts of neat stuff. For example, the synth pad is really nice on the P-125. It's great with piano for the same type of thing over a ballad. It's just a little bit less in your face than the strings can be. And there's also great combinations I'm finding with the electric pianos as well. You can also adjust the relative volumes of each of the split voices to make one or the other louder relative to each other. And you can also shift the octave of each voice. I actually found that piano over the synth pad, where the synth pad is moved up an octave, sounds really, really cool. Split mode, that allows you to split the keyboard into 2 voices, one on the left and one on the right. And there is also the built-in adding a bass option. So all you have to do is just hit the bass, and then it'll be on the left-hand side with whatever you've got selected as your main voice, and you can cycle through the different bass options, etc. So super easy. Use that a lot with playing some like a walking bass line in the left hand, and then some like blues or jazz or something in the right. Now the lesson mode, that's where you split the keyboard in half as well, only this time you've got the same octave, same pitch on each side, which is basically meant to be playing with an instructor so that you each have the same pitch. There's also 50 built-in songs that are built into the piano, most of them classical, that you can play back and play along with. You can adjust the tempo, and you can also turn on or off the right or left hand so that you can practice one or the other as you work on playing along with it. So here's a quick video on layering and splitting the piano and using the bass voices. Okay, so Yamaha's Smart Pianist app. This app adds so much functionality to the P-125, it really deserves a review of its own. If I was to go through it in full, it would make this video way too long. So I am going to do a separate review just on the app itself where I go in depth to how to do everything. But in order to keep this video as short as possible, I'm just going to go over the kind of the main features so that you know what this app is going to be able to add to your experience with the P-125. Like with most apps, you can really easily control all of the piano settings. So for example, I can go in here and I can choose voices. So grand piano, live grand, ballad grand, etc. And you can see as I make those choices that it's changing on here as well. If I go over to electric piano, that's going to happen here. And same thing, if I change it on the keyboard, then it's going to communicate back with the app. So that's nice. So let's say I choose a DX piano, and then I want to add a layer. So I can choose a layer, and it's layered it with a synth pad. I can click on that and say I want to layer it with some strings instead, so you can see that's being updated here as well. And let's say instead I want to play with some bass. So I want to play with a fretless bass, so I'm going to do that. Same thing, communicates with the piano, and it's displayed here for you. And you can also edit the like the relative volumes between the voices and any other adjustments you want to make. You can choose a rhythm, choose a tempo, all of that, and then you can save your registration, which is really, really cool, and give it a name. So then you can recall it really quickly instead of having to try and figure out how exactly did I have that song all set up. You can see I've got a bunch saved in here. I actually just saved them by the song name. So for example, I could click on Norwegian Wood, and it's chosen my harpsichord with a layer of electric piano behind it, and it's chosen the correct rhythm and everything for it. So super, super handy feature. There's sheet music for the built-in songs. So if I go to Song, and I'll choose Ode to Joy by Beethoven, it's going to display the score. I can play along with that. I can mute the left hand, I can mute the right hand, I can even transpose it up or down, and it'll adjust the sheet music appropriately, and I can also slow it down or speed it up. So super, super handy. Now, if I go to Music Library, that's going to show my my iTunes library, which I actually don't have loaded on this device, so I've just got the one song on there. So when I click on this song from my iTunes library, what's really, really cool is it's going to analyze it, and it's going to make a chord chart for me. And then you can play along with that chord chart as you hear the song. So that's an amazing, amazing feature. And it also works for your own songs. Here's just a first few bars of Let It Be that I recorded on the piano as audio. And it builds a chord chart from what I've played that I can then play along with. So that's an absolutely amazing feature, super, super cool. And you can speed it up, slow it down, transpose it, do all of that stuff as well. Then you can also do your recordings in MIDI as well as audio on here. When you're recording MIDI just on board on the piano, you only have the one song with the two tracks on it. When you're recording on your device, you can record as many MIDI songs as you want and as many audio songs as you want, whatever your device can hold. So super, super handy. If you are recording in MIDI on the device, you should know that as soon as you record something in MIDI on the device, it's going to overwrite the current single song that is MIDI on the on board on the piano itself. Then once you've recorded, let's say your audio songs in particular, it's going to be a WAV file. Then you can, using the app, you can upload it to a Dropbox account, and then from there you can very quickly and easily share it with friends, family, whoever on social media or email or however you want to share it. So you do need a Dropbox account, but Dropbox is free and pretty easy to use. Okay, other choices to the P-125. There's the Casio PSX line of pianos that's pretty new. There's the 1000 and the 3000. The 1000, which is the cheaper one, sells for the same price as the Yamaha P-125 does. It's a very interesting option because it's really light, very slim, runs on batteries, and it does have left and right line outs and some pretty good sounds. There's 18 sounds on it, 16-watt speakers. So it's an interesting option for gigging and playing live because of the battery functionality. The one thing about the Casio line, though, is that the action is very, very unique. It is a dual sensor like the Yamaha is, However, because of just the physical nature of the piano being so small, the pivot length is kind of unusual, and best thing to say about that is just before you buy a PSX piano from Casio, you might want to make sure that you go and try it in a store and make sure that you like the action. Some people absolutely love it. I know people that gig with it. Some people do not like it. So it's a very personal thing. So make sure you check the action out before you consider one of those. The Casio 3000 is exactly the same as the 1000, except it's got a whole bunch of arranger functionality built in, hundreds of sounds and that type of thing, but it is more expensive than the P-125. And still, same comment on the action. You have to make sure you like the action first. There's a Kawai ES-110. Sells for a little more than the Yamaha P-125 and is very often compared to it and does get favorable reviews. I have no access to Kawais where I live. I've never seen one, played one, touched one, heard one, so I can't really comment on that, but it might be one that you want to investigate as well. Okay, the Roland FP line of pianos is the one I want to talk about the most because that's the one I'm most familiar with, having owned an FP-30 for 6 months. The cheapest one in that line is the FP-10, which actually sells for about the same price as the P-125 does. The pros for that one are it's got that triple sensor Roland PHA-4 action, which is really good. But that being said, beyond that, the P-125, in my opinion, has got a lot more features for that price than the FP-10 does. The FP-10 has no left and right line out ports. It has very limited onboard control. The whole thing is controlled with keyboard combinations. There's no onboard recording, and the USB port is MIDI only. It doesn't have the audio built in, and the app is much less functional in my opinion. The FP-30, which is the one that I owned, is a much closer comparison. It sells for more than the P-125 does, so it's not really apples to apples. It does have that great action. It's got more sounds than the FP-10 does, and it does have some rhythms and things built in, but the onboard interface on the FP-30 really isn't the greatest either. And the app is the same. So the app is okay, but it doesn't have anywhere near the functionality that the Smart Pianist app does. And the other thing that it's missing is the line out ports. You have to use the headphone jack to connect to external audio equipment. And it also doesn't have that audio interface that's built into the USB to device port. And that's a huge feature on the P-125. Now the plot does thicken a little bit because Roland just released an upgraded version of the FP-30, which is the FP-30X, which is a little bit more expensive yet. So again, not really apples to apples with the P-125. It's more expensive, but they've added some features that were missing on the FP-30. They've added the line out ports, and they supposedly have added the audio in and out through the USB to device port. I've actually been having a little bit of difficulty confirming that, but it does appear that that is indeed the case. They have actually removed the onboard rhythms, but they've also improved some of the voices, in particular the electric piano voices. So it's a little bit closer to the P-125 in my opinion, but given the extra features in the Smart Pianist app and the fact that this is actually a little bit less expensive, well, I'm sitting here with the P-125, not a Roland, so you know what my opinion is. So the verdict on the Yamaha P-125, whether it's the right piano for you really depends on your specific needs and interests. There's no doubt whatsoever, in my opinion, that it provides massive value and versatility for the price. Almost all of the pianos that it typically gets compared to are more expensive. The only time I would recommend the FP series, in my opinion, is if the action is really, really important to you. If you're wanting the most realistic acoustic piano simulation that you can get, then the PHA-4 triple sensor action is going to come closer than the GHS action on the Yamaha. So if you're taking piano lessons from a teacher on an acoustic piano, you're going to be taking your formal grading tests on an acoustic piano, then it might be worth it to you to look at something from the Roland FP line, or like I said before, perhaps the Yamaha 515, which is a much more expensive piano, but it's Yamaha's top of the line in the portable series. The only time I would really recommend the Casio PSX series is if you really want the battery operation, and if you have played their action, which I mentioned is a bit unique, and you really happen to like it. So why did I choose and why do I recommend the Yamaha P-125? To me, it just really seems to check off all of the boxes for me. The sounds are all really good. The fully weighted action is really good. The onboard user interface is fantastic for the price. Even though there is no screen, it's really, really easy to change most of your settings. It's got a really well implemented and easy to use set of rhythms and backing bass. It has 1/4-inch line outputs for connecting to external audio, so it's great for gigging. And it's got a fantastic app with tons of features, including the ability to record audio directly, which is absolutely fantastic. So with all that in mind, I would highly recommend this piano if it fits in with your needs and your budget. If you want to check out current prices for the P-125 or for some of the other pianos I've been talking about in this review that I'm comparing it to, please click my appropriate affiliate link below and check that out. So thanks a bunch and happy piano playing. Have a good one.